Hello and welcome to World News Program, streaming to you live on all 24 News. I'm your host, Griffith Zachary. Up next are the top stories. Zionist raids in Khan Yunis leave 500 martyrs amid forced displacement and ethnic cleansing. Hamas urges Arab and Islamic summit to end the genocide in Gaza. Algeria condemns the massacre as a crime against humanity, and Palestine welcomes historic move towards international justice. That's next. Also coming up, Algerian Army Gazette highlights Algeria as key regional stabilizer and vows for readiness for upcoming presidential elections. And Algeria advocates IMF support over forces in Libya, urges protection of Libya's ceasefire, and the UN backs efforts to curb the escalation. Stay tuned, the details are right after the break. Hello again and welcome to the details. First off in our news file, Zionist occupation forces killed 5 Palestinians in relentless airstrikes across all the Gaza Strip. The attacks hit homes in Sheikh Radwan, Nusayrat and Rafah. Rescue teams managed to recover 2 bodies from Rafah, while in Khan Yunis, southern Gaza, more casualties have been reported with several wounded. Drones have been busy targeting groups near Wednesday Market and eastern al-Barkaba or Barabak, adding to the chaos with strikes on towers and neighborhoods. Still with the same story, the Palestinian Ministry of Health reported that over or around 500 health workers have been killed and hundreds injured since the start of the Zionist genocide on Gaza on October 7th. Over 310 workers have been arrested and 130 ambulances destroyed in Gaza. The West Bank has seen over 340 attacks on health facilities by occupation forces. Meanwhile, the ministry urged for unconditional humanitarian aid and support for evacuating the injured for critical care. The Palestinian Liberation Front condemned the attacks on refugee camps as part of a Zionist strategy for ethnic cleansing and denying the right of return. In a statement, the front emphasized that ongoing attacks on Gaza's refugee camps are intended to break the popular resistance. They called for international accountability for occupation officials over these crimes. Over 75,000 people have been displaced from southern Gaza as occupation forces issued orders that are driving more residents to flee. Many Palestinians see these orders as dire threat akin to death traps and field executions. This is Salman Nasib reporting now.
The Zionist military ordered more evacuations in southern Gaza after a deadly airstrike on a school-turned-shelter in the north killed at least 80 Palestinians, according to the local health authorities. Early in the morning, hundreds of families were seen carrying their belongings in their arms, folded their tents, amid destruction, seeking elusive refuge.
There is no safe place in this situation. Safety is only with God. May God protect people's lives. Look at the destruction. Everyone has left their tents and the situation is really bad. Where are the countries? Why they leave us alone like that? The children who are being torn to pieces are not to blame and ruin everywhere. I urge them to come here, film and see for themselves.
The High Commissioner.
The latest UNRWA statistics reveal that the occupation forces have recently displaced more than 70,000 people from the southern Gaza Strip, which was once considered safe by the occupation. This coincides with evacuation orders from the north. Now that 86% of Gaza's areas are under evacuation orders, many Palestinians are asking themselves where they can escape. Mahmoud, a displaced Gazan from the north, had fled 6 times already, with his sick wife amid dire conditions making him wish death.
I fled 6 times already from the north, south, Al-Burayj, Maghazi, Al-Nusayrat and Rafah. Now where should I go? My wife is sick, she can't even speak. They told us to leave, but I ask where? Where should I go? I desire death now. I wish God would take my soul and these wars.
We are tired of being displaced 50 times. Find solutions for us. Where are the Arabs? Al-Aqsa is not for us alone. Al-Aqsa is for all Muslims.
The tragic events on Rashid Street, aid distribution points, UNRWA facilities and health institutions paint a stark picture of the Zionist entity's goals, marked by only death and devastation, failing to achieve its proclaimed aims. Despite 10 months of relentless attacks, the Palestinians continue to resist with strategic ambushes and missile strikes, showing their unwavering attachment to their land.
And in another topical development, 2 Palestinians, Subhi Ahmed Al-Bath and Kifah Dabaya, died from injuries sustained last week in Jenin refugee camp in the West Bank. Last Tuesday, occupation strikes killed 5 and injured 6 in eastern Jenin. The death toll in the West Bank since October 7th has reached 622, including 145 children. Still with the West Bank, tensions rise as Zionist forces injure a Palestinian and arrest 17 others during recent raids. The Red Crescent reported a gunshot wound victim from Nablus. The Palestinian news agency highlights raids in Al Ain camp and Al-Ishariya, where homes were searched and 17 individuals were detained, including 6 from Al-Ishariya. On Sunday, dozens of extremist Zionist settlers stormed Al-Aqsa Mosque in occupied Al-Quds, shielded by occupation forces. The Islamic Waqf for Endowment Department reports that 225 settlers entered in groups through the Moghrabi Gate, staging provocative tours and performing Talmudic rituals in the courtyards.
The message I would like to send to the residents and passers-by through the military correspondence that we see is that there is a functional division between the soldier and the settler in harming and damaging and creating an atmosphere that makes it a ghost town. We know that the settler's tour includes a rabbi who tells false stories, biblical stories, Zionist stories, and other hateful and false stories. And all of this pours into the sea of hatred that we witness from the settlers.
And as you followed in our headlines, Hamas calls on the Arab League and the Organization of Islamic Cooperation to tackle the ongoing Gaza genocide, which has dragged on for over 10 months. They demanded urgent measures to hold the aggression, cut ties with the Zionist occupation, and push for an emergency UN Security Council session to end the attacks and address international law violations. Meanwhile, the resistance dismisses new ceasefire talks, insisting mediators stick to agreement made on July 2nd. Algeria condemned the Zionist massacre of an unarmed civilian sheltering in Gaza school during prayer, calling it a heinous crime against humanity. The foreign ministry criticized the escalation of attacks, including the spread of dangerous diseases in Gaza. Algeria, through its foreign ministry, also called for international action against occupation actions and punitive measures, urging an end to occupying Israel's immunity and accountability for its crimes. Moroccan organizations and public figures slammed the regime's silence over the assassination of Hamas political bureau chief Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. They argue that the regime's stance is out of touch with the sentiments of the majority of the Moroccan people.
As we extend our warm greetings to the Palestinian people, to its valiant resistance and to its great martyrs, led by the nation's martyr, Commander Ismail Haniyeh, we express intense anger and discontent at the official position of the Moroccan authorities in not condemning the cowardly assassination operation which targeted the martyr leader and one of his companions. In the name of the Moroccan people and in the name of Morocco's history, civilization, identity and glories, in always defending Palestine, we as movements, bodies, and actors renew our condemnation of the treacherous crime of assassination, and we also renew our condolences to the Palestinian people, the resistance family, and the honorable family of the martyr. We disavow the official position that is amputated from the will of the authentic Moroccan people.
Meanwhile, Palestinian Prime Minister Mohammed Mustafa praised South Africa for bringing occupying Israel to international justice over its genocide in Gaza. In a call with South Africa's Minister of International Relations and Cooperation, Ronald Lamola, Mustafa highlighted the importance of continued South African support in holding the Zionist occupation accountable for its actions in Gaza and the West Bank. U.S. President Joe Biden stated that reaching a ceasefire agreement in Gaza before the end of his term is still possible. In an interview with CBS News, President Biden noted that the plan he proposed and approved by the UN Security Council remains viable.
We had showed that it was the plan I put together, endorsed by the G7, endorsed by the UN Security Council, etc., is still viable. And I'm working literally every single day to, and my whole team, to see to it that it doesn't escalate into a regional war. But it easily can.
Moving on to other topical news now, the Zionist entity ramps up airstrikes on southern Lebanon towns targeting Mays al-Jabal, Mehaibib, and Kafr Shuba, while continuing its Gaza aggression since October 7th. The Lebanese National News Agency reports 3 deaths from strikes on Taibeh. Beirut also experienced overnights or overflights and sonic booms. Another strike hit Adaysa, though details on casualties and damage remain unclear. The resistance in southern Lebanon launched 4 rockets at an occupation site in Upper Galilee, triggering warning sirens in Mitat, western Galilee, near the Lebanese border. Hezbollah reports hitting 3 Zionist sites, including a troop assembly near Berkat Risha, and targeting Rahib and Maj with artillery. In retaliation, occupation forces struck locations in southern Lebanon as well. Still in the Middle East development, but this time in Iran, where President Masoud Pezeshkian presents a list of 19 ministerial candidates to parliament. Key names include Abbas Arghashi for foreign minister, a woman for roads, Brigadier General Aziz Nasirzadeh for defense, Ismail Khatib for intelligence, and Iskandar Momeni for interior. Al Jaish Gazette stated that Algeria has become a significant player regionally and internationally and a stabilizing force in the area. In its August issue editorial, the Gazette highlighted Algeria's steady progress in various fields achieved through its commitment to international principles, including respect for international legitimacy and support for just causes, particularly the Palestinian and Sahrawi issues.
In the context of a new Algeria, progressing steadily towards growth and advancement across various sectors, achieving milestones that have made it an indispensable player regionally and internationally, and a stabilizing force in the region. This progress is guided by principles such as respect for international legitimacy, non-interference in the internal affairs of states, peaceful resolution of conflicts, and support for just causes, with particular focus on the Palestinian and Sahrawi causes.
The Algerian Army Gazette stressed further that safeguarding Algeria's security and sovereignty is a shared duty, crucial amid current regional and global uncertainties.
Maintaining the security and stability of our country amid the regional and international fluctuations, marked by escalating conflicts and tensions, exacerbated by links to terrorist organizations and transnational organized crime networks, requires the vigilance and commitment of all loyal citizens. Just as the liberation of our homeland and the restoration of its sovereignty from the grip of a brutal colonizer and the defeat of a bloody barbaric terrorism were causes that rallied all honorable Algerians, so too is the defense of our country and the preservation of its sovereignty today. This cause requires intensified, unified, and coordinated efforts to confront all threats and dangers facing our nation, regardless their type or origin.
The Gazette's editorial affirmed the military's full readiness to secure all stages of the presidential election process on September 7th.
Our country is preparing to hold early presidential elections on September 7, 2024. As always, during major national events, the People's National Army is fully prepared and ready to secure all stages of the electoral process, ensuring the appropriate security conditions are in place for the success of this event and allowing citizens to fulfill their electoral duty in an atmosphere of calm and tranquility.
Still with Algerian-related news, on Sunday, Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf met with Sahrawi Foreign Minister Mohamed Saadati to discuss the Western Sahara decolonization issue and upcoming UN engagements. They also reviewed African Union matters and emphasized inclusivity, in international partnerships. And this is just in. The Prime Minister, Minister of Economy and Finance of the State of Niger, Ali Lamine Zain, arrived in Algeria on Sunday at the head of an important ministerial delegation as part of an official visit. Lamine Zain was received at Houari Boumediene International Airport by Algerian Prime Minister Nadine Arbaoui. A statement from the Algerian Prime Ministry Services indicated that Mr. Arbaoui was accompanied by the Ministers of Foreign Affairs, Energy and Trade, as well as the Secretary General of the Algerian Defense Ministry. Algerian Foreign Minister Ahmed Attaf met with Libyan Ambassador Saleh Hama Mohammed Begda to address rising tensions in Libya. Mr. Attaf called on Libyan leaders to prioritize national interests and embrace the UN-led political process. He highlighted the need for free, fair elections to unify Libyan institutions and warned that violence only exacerbates the crisis. Algeria urged trust in the electoral process and the maintenance of the UN-led ceasefire to achieve a peaceful resolution and prevent further conflict. The Libyan Presidential Council discussed ways to maintain the ceasefire agreement and unify the military. This occurred during a meeting on Sunday between the Council's president and members of the Joint Military Committee 5+5 from the Western region, according to a Council statement. The UN support mission in Libya welcomed the ceasefire agreement and urged full compliance from all parties. It condemned recent clashes in Tajura and military mobilizations in Tripoli, expressing concern over civilian casualties and displacement. The mission called for an inclusive political process and credible elections to achieve lasting stability.
The mission welcomes the de-escalation efforts and the agreement to cease hostilities and calls on all parties to fully adhere to it. At the same time, the mission continues its communications with the authorities, urging them to assume their responsibilities by ensuring the end of armed clashes, restoring calm to populated areas, and holding those involved accountable. The mission considers these clashes as a reminder of urgent need to verify military. The mission considers these clashes as a reminder of the urgent need to unify military and security institutions and establish legitimate, accountable institutions. It also views this as an opportunity to expedite the launch of comprehensive political process, leading to credible elections, paving the way for lasting stability and prosperity for the Libyan people.
In another development in Africa still, the Sudanese Ministry of Health reported 53 deaths from recent rains, with 208 injuries and 9,777 affected families across 9 states. The rains caused over 2,000 homes to collapse completely and damaged more than 4,000 partially. More on this story with Nabil Khazini now.
As they face the harsh reality of war and as they struggle with the ravages of violence, nature in Sudan also had its own say. Sadly for these people who flee the fires of the raging battles, flooding worsens the plight of the millions of displaced refugees in Sudan. What could be worse than a combination of insecurity and such a dire humanitarian situation?
On the same day we arrived, it rained heavily. The suffering was immense. This was the second suffering after the war. All the tents were swamped, not inside but underneath the plastic.
Over the past few days, large areas in Sudan have witnessed the highest rainfall and floods in years, which have swept through areas in the far north considered for decades outside the country's rain map. As a consequence, around 70 people lost their lives, thousands of homes were destroyed, and there are growing concerns that entire areas in the flood's path may be completely submerged.
We are currently in the process of distributing the non-food item which will help forcibly displaced community that have been affected by flood to face the current situation. You can understand that this is a crisis over a crisis.
To date, over 10 million people have been forced to flee their homes, both within the country and across its borders. The UN warns that as the conflict spreads across Sudan, people continue to move in search of safety.
Moving on to other development, but this time in Europe, the Russian military announced the halt of Ukrainian advances near towns in the Kursk region, where Kiev has previously been conducting a ground offensive for several days. Moscow vowed to respond to Ukrainian attacks on its territory, stating that the response will come promptly. Sofian Kanturi reports now.
Ukrainian troops and Russian reinforcements appear to be gearing up for a major confrontation in the villages and towns of western Russia in the wake of surprising Ukrainian offensive in the region. The Ukrainian advances into western Kursk region has penetrated more than 10 kilometers past the border, making it the furthest since the start of the conflict. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky confirmed on Saturday that Kiev was carrying out a cross-border offensive into Russia, promising to move the war into the Russian territories.
Today I received several reports from Commander-in-Chief Alexander Serkiy regarding the front lines and our actions to push the war onto the aggressor's territory. I am grateful to every unit of defense forces ensuring that Ukraine is proving that it can indeed restore justice and ensure the necessary pressure on the aggressor.
President Zelensky justified the incursion as exactly the kind of pressure that is needed, pressure on the aggressor.
Only from the beginning of this summer and only from the Kursk region, our Sumy region suffered almost 2,000 strikes, artillery mortars, drones. We also monitor every missile strike, and each such strike deserves a fair response.
On the other hand, Moscow has vowed a tough response to the incursion, and a Ukrainian missile strike on a residential building in Kursk that is said injured at least 13. Russian Defense Ministry said it engaged Ukrainian troops near towns 25 kilometers and 30 kilometers from the border.
The perpetrators of these crimes will be held accountable for them. A tough response from the Russian armed forces will not be long in coming.
Today, the enemy launched another attack on our civilian population. There are victims. They are now in the hospital. Fortunately, no one died. The situation is under control. We are working together with law enforcement agencies.
Moreover, the Russian Defense Ministry said its forces had shot down 35 drones and 4 rockets overnight that it said was fired by Ukrainian forces, while Kiev authorities claimed that Russian forces launched a drone attack on 11 Ukrainian regions in the early hours of Sunday, causing casualties in 7 areas.
Thousands of anti-racism protests have rallied in towns and cities across England following a week of anti-immigrant rioting and disorder driven by fake news online. More details with Marwa Blaiwer now.
Thousands of anti-racism protesters have rallied in towns and cities across England following a week of anti-immigrant rioting and disorder driven by fake news online. For the 4th day in a row, demonstrators gathered outside Belfast City, Edinburgh and London to protest against racism after disorder spread across Britain last week.
I live here nearly about 23 years. First time I see it in my life. I always have here so many friends in North Ireland, never have no problem, nothing. But what I see last week is not nice for nobody from around the world.
This followed widely shared online posts that falsely identified the suspected killer of 3 young girls in July 29 knife attack as a Muslim migrant. As a result, the government is considering tougher regulations for social media companies. After days of rioting that targeted Muslims and hotels housing migrants, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer said extra police numbers and swift justice had deterred people he referred to as far-right thugs.
Well, this sign says, a no to Farage, a no to racism, a no to hatred. And many MPs, they incite hatred and division, especially towards Muslims and migrants and immigrants. It could happen again, and that's something that the country has to face. But we need to get the public behind us, say, look, we do not want this sort of behaviour. We don't want the far right destroying the peace that we have here in the UK.
The predicament facing the country is a microcosm of the broader challenges confronting many European countries as they face a series of problems relating to migration and the rise of far-right sentiment.
And with this, ladies and gentlemen, our news bulletin comes to a close. To interrupt the very urgent and breaking news, where it seems that we have attacks on southern Lebanon, and there are some reports saying that Iran will launch a direct attack on the Zionist entity. You will have more on this story later on. Take care.